Hi, I'm Alex Thorpe. I'm the co-creative director here at Queen's Theatre in Hornchurch. I'm with Moira Buffini, the writer of Handbagged. Moira, you are an Olivier Award-winning playwright, screenwriter whose successes with Harlots saw 3 seasons and a novelist. When you started out as a writer, could you have foreseen the success you'd have go on to have?
No, is the simple one-word answer. I didn't start out as a writer. I started out as an actor. When I was young, I wanted to be an actor and didn't succeed.
Oh.
So, and writing sort of took over. So I always sort of thought when I started out writing, I sort of thought, well, I haven't done very well at career number 1. I found it really hard. I was rubbish at auditions and I didn't get any work. So maybe career number 2 will go a bit better. But I started from a place of, let's just see how it goes. I think I've always been a compulsive writer. That even when I was an actor, I was still sort of scribbling things.
And when you first made that decision to go from acting to writing, what was that first instinct? What was that first story or the first thing that you got ink to paper? What was that?
It's a play called Blavatsky's Tower.
Great.
When I was a temp at the time, I was working at a reception desk in some ludicrous office, and I just started to write this really weird play about this family who lived on the top floor of a tower block, and they were all except one complete agoraphobics. I absolutely loved writing it, and I thought, well, given that acting is actually mostly temping and waitressing, I sort of gave it a really good go. Blavatsky's Tower wasn't my first play on, but it was like my calling card.
Yeah.
And I sent it round to all the literary managers, and one of them, Paul Syret, who worked at Soho Theatre, read it and said, well, I really like your weird play. We can give you 250 quid to make a start on something else. And if we like that, we'll we might turn it into a commission. And I thought, okay, God, that someone has given me a kind of a vote of confidence, if you like. And so I just thought, okay, well, whatever I write then, it's got to be absolutely brilliant. They have got to put it on. And I wrote this play called Gabriel, which they did put on. Great. Got more commissions, and it sort of all went on from there.
They're so important, those people, aren't they? Those I don't want to call them gatekeepers, but those people that give that sense of confidence and actually giving ourselves permission to reach out to them, to go also, they are looking for the playwrights, the ideas. Theatres need to be filled with stories. They need people to fill them with.
Yeah.
It's so lovely that you had that experience so early on in your writing journey.
It's kind of been quite gutting recently to see literary departments falling by the wayside in all the vicious cuts. Yeah. Because I think they are so important. Because on one hand, yes, you can say they're gatekeepers, which sounds like quite a negative thing, but on the other hand, they are the people who go out, who've got all the feelers out there, looking for new talent, looking for new voices, and I just think they do an incredibly important job. And I'm very, very grateful to certain people in my life, like Paul Syret, who just gave me that massive chance.
You found yourself in a position to do some of that yourself, like actually meeting playwrights, talking to them about your ideas, I guess doing things like this.
I'm the eternal freelance. I've never ever had an actual proper job in my life. So I've never worked in a building, so I don't have that kind of structured position. I think there are other people who are better at it than I am. But I do love meeting new writers, and I do love reading their work and, talking to, in fact, increasingly, the older I get, the more I enjoy doing that. So, yeah.
That's so lovely. From those early plays that you wrote, what was the journey of learning about how you're known for writing these huge, big, global plays, global ideas, historic characters? What are the things that you learned from those early plays to take you to this point in your career and journey as a playwright?
Always write the play you think you can't write. It's so exciting. And I'm still doing it now. I'm currently writing the play I think I can't write. It's so exciting to do that, to think, God, I'm in at the deep end, I don't know how to do this. You know, we have big theatres in this country and they need filling with interesting new works. And what I found with a bunch of new writers, my sort of peers, coming up through the National Theatre Studio around 20 years ago, we looked around the theatre, who was programming what in the country, and we found that cast sizes had gone from around 25 in Shakespeare's day, down to around 15, sort of Chekhov's time, down to 4. You know, that the plays that we were being commissioned to write as young writers basically had casts of 4 or less, or if you were really lucky, 6. You know, and all my first plays have 6 characters or less, because that's all you could get on, and we were all put on in studio theatres. And we started up this group called the Monsterists, and we said to the theatre powers that be, if you don't commission us to write for big stages, we're going to end up with heritage theatre in this country. You know, like you've got to take a chance on us. You've got to let us in. So we sort of banged really hard on the door, and the door did start to open. And within 10 years, like 4 of us had plays on the Olivier, you know, and I think that landscape has changed now. I think new writing, it's always a financial risk for theatres, so you understand why they want to do the classic with the star or the two-hander. You know, in these hard times, you understand it. But if we're not writing big plays, how are we ever going to write about society? And if we're not writing about society, how are we going to persuade people in?
And that's so incredible to hear. And I know a little bit about the Monstrous Group, and it's so brilliant to be reminded of the impact of that conversation, that we feel the benefits and the results of that conversation. And yes, it is hard, but what would it be without that conversation, without that banging on the doors?
Yes, it would be quite boring.
Yeah, I think it would.
And I think every generation's got its version of that as well. Every generation of young writers and artists have got, you know, you've got to come up and say, let us in, you know, because now I am one of the big old establishment, shaggy old lions, like the playwrights. I was sort of going, let us in, you know. So every generation has got to do that, I think, you know.
So brilliant. It's really important to remember that. Thank you. Your work spans various subject matters and mediums, from coming-of-age musical, Wonder.Land, to Netflix film, The Dig, about the excavation of Sutton Hoe in Suffolk. What attracts you to a story?
It's funny, they're all so varied and different.
Yeah.
Like the Sutton Hoo story, I just found it's an adaptation of a book, and I read the book and I was just sort of quite raw with emotion at the end of it, and I just and it had been such a vivid sort of picture painted of this era in time and these people and what they were trying to do, you know, like by digging up the past. It just seemed to say something about this world that was on the brink of war, and I don't know. I just found it. I found it sort of mysterious and moving, and I just read the book and thought, oh my God, I've got to do that. Other things, it's just stories that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck and that have got teeth. You know, like I get offered things and I think, why are you asking me to do that? It's too nice. It's too nice. Ask me to do something that's angry and dirty, and I'm much more interested. And again, it's that thing of write the play you think you can't write. Yeah. It's like, you know, like the musical was incredible. I was working with Damon Albarn. I thought I was there to do the book. And he said, so have you got any experience writing a libretto? And I said, no, none at all. I've never written a song in my life. And he said, well, I'm not doing it. You're writing the lyrics. And I said, but I don't know how to do that. And he said, well, that's all right. You know, and then a couple of weeks later, I got this email from him just going, where are my lyrics? And I just thought, okay. and it was just like swimming in the deepest sea. I absolutely didn't know what I was doing, and I was just like Googling Stephen Sondheim. And I just thought, okay, no, forget all that. This is Alice in Wonderland. What's the Cheshire Cat saying?
Great.
And what does the Cheshire Cat want in this story? It's Alice in Wonderland, but it's a computer game. So who's the Cheshire Cat? What does the Cheshire Cat want? What's he saying? And I just wrote that. And I sent it off to Damon. And then like 2 days later, this amazing song comes back. It was so brilliant. And that feeling of just like, I don't know what I'm doing, which is incredibly exciting, creatively. And the same feeling I've always had is like, God, you know, how do I do 10 years of history in a play, which is this play? How do I characterise these sort of monoliths of British history?
How do you make them people rather than just ideas?
So all of that, and always, you know, and then just like quite mad things as well. Like I really love vampires, and I just thought I really want to see vampires on stage. I really want to write, you know, just like, and so for young people, I wrote this play called A Vampire Story.
I love it.
Which then went on to become a film called Byzantium. You know, it's like, so things sort of have their lives.
I remember travelling around the country, seeing different versions of that play and watching different responses from the young people and what those characters meant, whether they were big Twilight ideas or big Twilight fans, or if there was something more about their community. I loved it, and I saw maybe 10 different versions of it, all responding to it based on where they were at in their own lives, in their own communities. It was such a great provocation for them.
Yeah, and the best age group to write for, I truly believe, yes.
Why is that? Why are they the best?
Because they're open. They're absolutely open, and their minds are hungry. You know, I think I write for myself at that age a lot.
Great.
And to be fair, you know, the 2 novels that I've just written are for young adults, you know. Best audience ever.
Yeah, brilliant. What was the starting point to go, I want to write about Margaret Thatcher and Queen Elizabeth and their relationship? What triggered that idea?
Indu Rubasingham had asked me to write. She was doing an evening, or 2 evenings, of called Women, Power and Politics. She'd asked 4 writers in each evening, each to write a half-hour play, any subject from now or then to do with women, power and politics. I said, has anyone picked Thatcher yet? And I said, I want to write about Thatcher. So I thought, okay, women, power and politics. And I started researching Thatcher's political life. And the only woman in Thatcher's political life, really, because she did not have any female cabinet members, or pretty much anyone apart from her dresser around her, who was female. The Queen was the only woman who Thatcher really regularly came up against. And I thought, God, that's interesting. And then I started to read about the Queen's weekly audience and the fact that no one ever knows what goes on in an audience. And I just sort of thought, that is absolutely brilliant. So I just started researching, you know, just like reading all the biographies that were out there of each woman, watching endless YouTube of them, and sort of getting their voices in my head, really.
I'm so pleased to hear that's your starting point, because I've spent my last 6 months doing exactly the same, but obviously afterwards.
And you sort of think you've got an absolute duty to be fair.
Yeah. Interesting. I feel like your play is fair. People keep saying to me, is this the Thatcher bashing play? I was like, no, that's not what Moira's written.
I think it's fair.
And I think it's interesting that it didn't start in that place.
I think it's more interesting to be fair
Is.
than to be polemical.
Yeah.
I think it is much more interesting. And then all the work's on the audience. When we opened the play in Kilburn, Thatcher got booed.
Yeah.
And when we opened it in the West End, Thatcher got cheered. We remounted the play the week the Queen died. The whole production had a really different feeling. And then we played it through Liz Truss's premiership. And again, it just had a very different feeling.
It's enormous, and I think it'd be really interesting as we take it from Hornchurch across the country into those communities that have very, very strong opinions and strong experiences
Yeah.
from the decisions that
Yeah.
particularly Thatcher made.
Yeah.
I'm to say, looking forward to hearing the reaction. I'm fascinated by the reaction, I guess, that we're going to experience.
And I get it, you know.
Yeah.
I think she was so divisive.
One thing that unites your writing is the strong sense of character that you give us. From Lydia Quigley, the villainous brothel owner portrayed by Leslie Manville in Harlots, to Queen Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher. How do you go about taking these iconic monolith characters to creating people and the fun and the human thing that I think you so successfully find in Handbagged?
There's sort of two different parts to that question. I think one of them is about fictional characters,
Yeah.
which is Lydia Quigley, you know, and most of the, to be fair, most of the characters in most of my plays are entirely fictional. So that's one thing. And then there's this other thing. It's creating people who actually did exist. And you know, that's a matter of research and then what you do with that research. And that's the bit that it's very hard to define. I think you can talk about structure till the cows come home. This is you know, here's all the rules about structure. But I think the rules about character writing, for me anyway, I'm not even sure there are rules. Yeah. Because to me, that's always been the kind of magic bit. That's the bit that just happens. That just, you put in as much as you can, as much research as you can. And it's almost like then emptying out critical voice, structure brain, emptying everything out and just letting them speak. And I think that's the same for fictional characters as well. A lot of playwrights would say the same thing. When it goes well, you literally can't type fast enough because you're trying to catch up with what they're saying. They're doing the talking and all you are doing is being the scribe. That's when it's going well. And then of course, you know, you have the days when it doesn't go so well. But I think the idea of that is not going, oh gosh, this intellectual problem of how to dramatise the Queen. You just sort of, you fill your head with the Queen and listen to all these little garden parties that she's at that you get on YouTube, and she's shaking someone's hand and going, oh, Barbados, terribly nice place. You know, and just little lines like that, you just think, oh, that's the person. You know, that's something graspable, that sort of humour, that kind of, that voice, the way of it. I think there's a great danger when you are dramatising real people is that you can feel intimidated by them. And I think it's no good being intimidated by them. I almost think that's why I brought these two giant women into the theatre, because that's my space.
Yeah, very good.
You know, that's where I'm in charge, that's where I know what I'm doing, you know, and that equalises us.
Yeah.
So the play doesn't pretend to be in Buckingham Palace or Balmoral or the Houses of Parliament or anywhere else. It is in the theatre. And Thatcher and the Queen are both out of their comfort zones in the theatre. Yeah. So that equalised us, me as the writer and them as characters. And then, you know, the play sort of sprang up out of that. And I think it is irreverent, yeah. But I don't think it's disrespectful. I absolutely don't. To either woman, I think it is respectful to them both.
I think you are absolutely right today. I love that idea about space. I love that safety net, that security, that the theatre that you place them in. And I say this sat on top of a pound coin with another pound coin ahead of us. But you have written this witty, sharp, dynamic comedy. What are the secrets to taking someone like her and writing a comedy that has such national and global reach?
Oh. Most of not everything I write has humour in it, but mostly it does. Yeah. I think that is my perception of the world. I think that is the great human comedy that we all live in. I think the funny thing about Thatcher is her lack of sense of humour. I find that really funny. Yeah. And the funny thing about the Queen is her incredibly high status. I find that really funny. I don't think there's any great trick to writing comedy. I think it is to do with you, it's to do with who you are, and it's to do with how you perceive the world. It's also to do with playwrights that I loved. Perhaps it's the Irish in me, there's the great Irish tradition of comedy, all of those playwrights, Oscar Wilde. I love that sort of tradition of the human comedy in British writing. Even when you're dealing with the darkest subject matter, for example, Harlots, which was about the sex trade, the economy of women's bodies. And we wrote it in the 18th century, but that trade hasn't changed. It's, that's what we're examining. We're examining this economy. People's response to that when they are living through the darkest times is humour, is laughter. I think it's a weapon. I think it's a defence mechanism. I think it's essential I think it's an essential part of our human spirit. And the really great thing about laughter, it comes from, in our evolution, it comes from a much older place in our brain than language. So we were laughing long before we were talking.
Oh, wow.
And I just think, well, that's essentially who we are. So,
And that kind of uncontrollable instinct that we have. I have to tell you, and maybe hopefully it's not this evening, but we did have a preview where your gooseberry line ruined our protagonists on stage, and it was such a joyful moment. It was so lovely. It was at the end of a very long week, and it was such a lovely moment where they held these characters up so perfectly, so effectively. And then we just got that beautiful moment that only theatre can do, where you share that moment with your audience. And yeah, it's so live and alive. I love that comes from our pre-speech. You've already talked about the influence and impact and how important it is to support that next generation of writers and artists and creatives. But what advice might you have to a writer, someone watching this, that's thinking about starting writing their play or wanting to become a playwright or a screenwriter?
Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. I'd say that's centrally important. Right. And even when it's yourself telling you you can't do it, I think that inner critical voice is often the most destructive one. Is just put it aside, tell it to shut up, tell it you'll talk to it on Wednesday, you're not talking to it today, and write freely. Try and make it a habit would be my other big piece of advice, is if you want to be a writer, you've got to put in the thousands of hours to get good. Write every day. You want to be a writer, write every day, even if it's only 10 minutes. There's amazing writing exercises that you can do. There's lots of stuff on the marvelous resource of YouTube. Getting together with your peers, I found that enormously helpful when I was starting out. That I would just get people to read my work, and instantly you see the flaws in it. I found that really, really useful. And theatre is a wonderful place to start, even if you do want to go on ultimately and be a screenwriter or whatever, because it teaches you that actually the word is important, the dialogue is important. Yeah, the action, yeah, this, yeah, that. But what people say is every single word of it carries weight, and you've just got to be able to learn to hear and respect it. Every single word. So the really good play is never naturalism. It's always, every word is considered. That word is there for a reason. So consider your words would be my last piece of advice.
I love that. You absolutely consider your words in Handbagged, and we spoke so much that I think there's 5 stage directions in your whole play, and we were like, there's a stage direction. What does she mean? Because the words are absolutely the driving force, and I think it's such a good example of that.
Yes, it's a joy not to write stage directions. You only write them when they absolutely have to be there,
Moira Buffini, thank you ever so much for giving some time, for talking to us, for sharing your experience, your story. It's so lovely to have dived into your play, into your world, into your brain a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. It's a privilege that you are doing my play. Thank you very much.